Hi parents! I thought I would make a video for the parents so that you guys can learn a little bit about how we teach writing in the classroom. I know that some of you have had some challenges with your kiddos when it comes to writing. The creative process is really challenging for 5 and 6 year olds because they have so many ideas in their head and they want to get them all on paper, and it's really hard to organize. So I thought I would make a video about how we do it in the classroom, so hopefully you'll be able to use this at home. I hope you learn 1 or 2 things that helps writing become a little less of a battle in your home. So I'm gonna go through basically 3 main steps, and each of those will have about 3 tips or tricks that hopefully help you. First, we'll start with drawing the picture, then we'll go to labeling and then writing sentences. So draw a picture, label, and write sentences. Now I know our lesson plan also has editing in there. Hopefully that's something that's going fairly okay in your home because they've already got their paper written and they just need to recognize capitalization and periods. But we'll start with those 3, and if we need a little extra work with editing, I'd be happy to make another video to help you guys. So first, I just want to show you some of the supplies we use. So I am really lucky that I have this paper because it's in my classroom, and I know that you guys got some of these sent home, but you're probably out. So if you don't have a printer, which I will put this on Class Dojo, but if you don't have a printer, you need something that's straight edge, so like a book, and you can make these lines and then make lines at the bottom. So you can certainly make this at home too on a blank piece of paper. The important thing is they've got a space to draw a picture, which is how they're gonna get their idea out right away, and then a couple lines for sentences that are pretty thick. These are probably 3/4 of an inch, so it gives them space to write their letters nice and neat, because at 5 years old, they're not gonna have the nicest, neatest handwriting. They need lots of space to write those letters because the fine motor is still developing. So we have our writing paper. We have a pencil. You'll understand why it's really important it's a pencil, and I'll explain that a little bit. We have crayons. We have our personal word wall, which is not something I sent home with you guys. Originally, when this was all happening, we didn't really know what was going on, so I didn't have a chance to send one of these home. I will put this also on Class Dojo, but it's also something you can make on your own. Again, you make lines and you write the words. I'll also share on Dojo one that I made. It's really good for the kids to make their own personal word wall, because then they're getting practice writing each of those words and alphabetizing, which is great work. So if you want to print this off, great. If you want to make your own, it's a great lesson for kiddos to do, and really awesome that they can go back and refer to something they made. So no big deal if you can't print it. It's just a really good learning opportunity. Next, I have our alpha chart. You should have gotten one of these sent home when you came to pick up the packets when school was first closed. If you don't have one, I'm happy to certainly put one on Class Dojo so you can print it off. Right now, we don't really know how we're going to be able to deliver more materials, if we'll be able to deliver more materials, but I know I can mail them. So if you need one at home because you don't have a printer, I will certainly mail one to you. Just send me your address and I'll be happy to do that. Also, we have our coloring rubric. Now, this might seem like it's kind of strange to tell kids how to color. This is something we use with writing. It's not something we use with art, because art should be explore and creativity and experimenting with coloring and what they want. But with writing, we're trying to convey a message. So we really try to make it known to the kids that we want to be over here, where we're coloring in the lines, we're using colors that make sense, and we're not leaving a lot of white space, because writing is trying to convey a specific message. Coloring is actually really, really important. So this is something I'll also share on Class Dojo, so you'll have a couple resources. This is also really good because the kids can self-rate, and they made this in the classroom with me, so they're very familiar with it. And they can go back and say, did I leave white space? And they can go back during the editing process and adjust their picture so that it meets our coloring rubric. So it might seem kind of like oh, that's strange. That's something different that you wouldn't expect necessarily in a classroom, but that is something that we focus a lot on in a kindergarten classroom. So it's nice to have that there. So I'm going to start with our first step, which is draw a picture. And the topic I'm going to use is the one coming up this week, which is a game I played at home. So I'm not quite sure what games you have at home. I know a really popular one in our classroom is Candyland. So I'm going to use that as an example because it's something the kiddos will be familiar with. But certainly if you played Uno or Chutes and Ladders or whatever games you have at home, that's awesome. And so first thing you're going to do is brainstorm with your kiddos about what's a game that you guys have played recently, so that they have some ideas of what happened. And then not just what's the game you played, but did they like playing it? Did they win? Did they lose? How did they feel when they lost? You can go a lot of different directions with that game. So it's not just a game they played, but also what happened when they played the game. Who did they play with? What did they do after? Maybe they got to eat snacks while they were doing it. All those kinds of fun things. So I'm going to start with, I played Candyland, and I'm going to start with drawing a picture. So I want to draw a picture of the game board and then maybe some people that I played with. And we really try to focus on in our classroom that we can use shapes we know how to draw other things. So I'm going to kind of give you an example. And this is an anchor chart we have in our classroom, so your kids will be familiar with it. If you talk to them about using shapes to draw things. So we know we can draw a person if we do a circle with 2 lines, and we've done rectangles and some smaller rectangles, some circles for hands, some rectangles for legs. So you don't have to draw this for them. For an example, they should know how to do it. It's just a good thing to refer back to when they're getting really frustrated that they can't draw something. You can say, what shapes could you use to make this? Because they've heard that before quite a bit, and it might help just re-trigger some memories of how to draw things. So we can do circles for the eyes. We do squiggly lines for the hair. We can do a half circle for the mouth and maybe a half circle for the nose. All things that they've been taught before, they should be very familiar with. They've practiced before. So when they're going through this process, just try to remind them there's shapes they can use to draw things. And then what are some shapes that they can use? So right off the bat, drawing a game board, they can use a square because that's a great shape, or a rectangle, depending on what they're going for. So I'm going to draw a square. My whiteboard is, there we go. I'm going to draw a square for Candyland. And this is why I say use pencil, because 5-year-olds make lots of mistakes, just like we do as adults, and they're going to want to fix it. If they start with crayon or pen, you're going to experience a lot of frustration probably because they make a mistake and it's harder to adjust. So we talk about using pencil a lot and then adding crayon later once it looks the way they want it to look. So Candyland has some squiggle lines, so I'm going to draw those in. And it's got some boxes. Now this amount of detail might be appropriate for your child, it might not be. You're going to have a really good gauge depending on how frustrated they get when you ask them to add more detail. And when you ask to add more detail, say, think about the board. What else is on the board? Maybe they go look at it. Could you add anything else to the picture that's on the board that you don't have? So this is a great way to help them add detail. If they get extra frustrated with it, move on. It's just a way to see kind of how much you can push them to learn a little bit more and get a little bit better at writing. So I'm going to draw some candy pieces on here. That's a circle. And I can draw some lines, and then I draw a triangle with a squiggly line, and that looks like a piece of candy. So all of this is shapes that they know how to draw to help them make the picture. So I'm going to draw some people who are playing. So I'm going to do a circle, 2 lines. Maybe this is I played with my sister. And I'm over here. And you can also do, so we've done triangles for the bodies of a person, so you could do that too. When we did this in our classroom, we drew a mom and a dad, and the mom was a triangle, which is a symbol they're pretty familiar with. But they can do whatever they're comfortable doing. So I'm going to draw my hair. And my sister, maybe she wore a ponytail, so I'm going to draw a circle with lots of lines coming out. And my pictures, when I do examples for them, tend to have a little less detail, a little less color, because I want them to get to their writing really quick. So I will post an example of what we want on Dojo, so you know what this would eventually turn into, okay? But the focus here is that I'm using shapes to draw a picture, and they can all draw shapes. They just have to put them together. If they're really frustrated, have them draw on the whiteboards they sent home, which was just that sheet protector with blank white paper. And you can use that with the dry erase marker they were sent to practice their drawing first. So if you have a kiddo that gets frustrated really easily, you can have them practice drawing the game board first in dry erase marker, and sometimes that helps. And then finally, I'm going to color it. And so I'm going to refer to my coloring rubric. I'm going to look at, okay, I want these green smiley faces, so I want to make sure I'm coloring inside the lines. I want to make sure I use colors that make sense, and I want to leave no white space. So in this background, I might have, maybe I played in the kitchen, so I would have a refrigerator, maybe. It's got a handle. So I want to make sure that my kiddo is using lots of detail. So there's not just white space behind them. And so then there's a counter, right? Maybe there's a pantry over here. And maybe we've got the table leg and another table leg. And then maybe I have a rug or carpet or something going on over here. So there should be color all through this picture. Again, I'll post on Dojo kind of what a good goal would be for that. And then I'm going to color it. So I want to make sure I use colors that make sense. And that means that unless you have an orange refrigerator at home, we don't want them coloring that refrigerator orange, because we want it to look like the message they're trying to convey and like reality. So I'm going to use gray for maybe a stainless steel refrigerator. Maybe it's white, so then they actually wouldn't have to color. That would be okay if it's white, or if you have a white crayon you want them to use, that's awesome. Now I'm going to bring this a little bit closer for a second. Now that doesn't have all the white space filled in. And that would be something I would go back and tell a kiddo, okay, you need to make sure you get all the white space. And they'll be a little bit frustrated, but you need to hold them to that high level of standard, because when they get to first grade, that's going to be an expectation. And they're going to want to be moving on to the next step. So if they're having to remind your kiddo to do this, it's going to be really hard to teach them more after that. So maybe you have, I know I have blue cabinets at home, so I'm going to paint my cabinets, or I'm going to color my cabinets blue. Again, this isn't a great example. I will post a good example. I'm just going quickly. Again, I'm painting in blue because that's the color of my cabinets. Really want to focus on using colors that make sense. This is something we really struggled with during the school year, and it's something that's really important for their writing in the future, because we were really focused on conveying a message. And then Candyland, maybe I'm coloring the path every few blocks. And I could keep going, but I really want to get through to the next thing. So again, the focus is this coloring rubric and getting them to use colors that make sense, color inside the lines, and no white space. So the next thing I'm going to talk about is labeling, and this is really important in kindergarten. This is something that helps them sound out words that they don't know, and helps them focus on sounding out those words. Because when we start writing full sentences, it's hard to spend that much time on just one word. So when we label, it gives them that time to really focus on letter sounds and trying to figure them out. Now, one thing that's really important with labeling is, unless it is a sight word or a rainbow word, they can spell it phonetically. And it's really important that you let them, because English is really confusing. And if we try to tell them how to spell a word like the word eyes, E-Y-E-S, that's really confusing for a 5-year-old when they're just learning letter sounds, that here's these letter sounds, and now this word doesn't match any of those sounds, and good luck. So it's really important that you let them spell things phonetically. Now, when we label, they just have to pick 6 things in this picture that they want to label. So first thing they could do is label the game board. So they're going to draw a line to the game board and they're going to sound out the word game. Now, when we do this in the classroom, we tell them to put the word in their mouth, chew it up like bubble gum, and then stretch it out. And they listen to each of the sounds as they stretch. So what's the sound that's close to their mouth? And then what's the next one? And what's that sound that you're hearing all the way at the end? Now, game is a tough one because it has an E at the end and they're not going to hear that E. So they do not need to write it when they're labeling, and you don't need to tell them because that's going to really confuse them. That's something that they will learn. It's called a magic E, and it makes the vowel say its name, which is the A in the middle of the game. But right now, it's too much for them, and if you try to tell them that, they're going to get really confused about their letter sounds. So we're going to just spell it phonetically, exactly the way that we hear the letters on the chart. So I'm going to say the word game, game. Put it in my mouth, and this is something they do. It seems a little silly, but we're chewing it up, and we're going to stretch it out. G, aim. And they're going to listen to each of those sounds. And if they don't get it, then they keep saying it. G, aim. And you say, what's that sound you hear at the beginning of the word? G, aim. If they're really struggling to find that letter sound, then we bust out an alpha chart. Okay, so the alpha chart, obviously G is right here, but there's a whole lot of letters on there. So your kid might be able to find the letter right away. And the great part is it has pictures, so that's going to help them, right, with that letter sound. But they might not. And if they're having a hard time finding it, then you could say it's in this row. So now they're looking at F, G, H, I, J, and it's a little less overwhelming for them. So now they're looking at this row. And now if they're still struggling, you say, okay, it's one of these 2. And then they can look at that and they can go, goat, house. Which one sounds like G? And they're going to go, oh, G. Hopefully. Sometimes we struggle with that too, and that's okay. It's just them getting exposed to that alpha chart. But again, start by exposing them to the whole thing, and then if they're struggling, you can kind of narrow down and narrow down. Okay, so we've put it in our mouth and we're stretching it out. G, aim. So I know that it's a G. I found that on my alpha chart. And the great thing about game is G, aim. That sound in the middle is the letter A, and it's the name. So usually kids can find that one pretty easily. But what they're probably going to do is hear that letter sound at the end. So G, aim, they're going to notice the So they might say that next, and that's okay. So your child might just write G, aim, G, and it might just be GM. And sometimes that's okay. Now, you know your child well. I have been working with them also academically, so if you're not quite sure what standard to hold them to, just ask. But a lot of our kiddos can get G, aim. It's just about stretching that word out and really focusing on G, aim. Okay, G, we got that. What's the next sound that you hear? A. Okay, I'm going to write that down. Okay, now I've got G, A, G, A, letter M. So when they're struggling with letter sounds, the alpha chart is super helpful for them to find that letter that comes next. And some of you, your child might not need the alpha chart, and that's great too. So you're gonna have them label 6 things that way. Now remember, this is just one day of writing work. So they're not gonna draw the picture, then label, then do sentences. They'll just do the labeling. So it seems like a lot, but just labeling is a good way to go. And some of you, your child might just be doing beginning letter sounds, and I can let you know if that's where they should be starting. If they can just get the G out of game, that's a great start too. So it's all about just trying to find that level your child's at and pushing them just a little bit farther so they're getting just a little bit better at a time. So that is labeling. Again, it's phonetic spelling unless it's a sight word. So if they're to write the word play and they're labeling that you're playing with your sister and they're gonna write play, that is a sight word. And that's when they should go to, if they don't know how to already spell it, they can go to their personal word wall that either you've printed off or they've made, and they can go p, p, p. So we have motions that go with each letter sound. So your kid might do that for P, okay? They can go to the P sound and they can find play there, and then they copy it down and they spell it correctly, because we want to make sure that our rainbow words are spelled correctly every time, because those are basically our spelling words. Those are words that we've learned how to spell, how to read, and we don't want to be spelling those ones incorrectly. Okay, so that is labeling. Again, we want to sound out those words using bubble gum. We stretch it out. Aim. And then we use our alpha chart if we need help with those sounds, and we want to spell phonetically. We don't want to spell literally, because that'll confuse a lot of kiddos, because English is a confusing language. Next, we're going to go on to our sentences, and this is where it gets, I think, probably most frustrating for kiddos, because it's really hard to remember their sentence. So ways we help them is we try to limit their sentences to 5 words so it fits on their hand. So that's language that we use. A good sentence fits on your hand. So some kiddos might be able to just come up with a sentence on their own that's pretty quick. Some of your kids might need a sentence starter right now to help them get going in the right way. In the classroom, I have them look at our word wall to think of words that they know that they can put into the sentence to make their sentence a little more simple. So a big one would be I, right? Play is one, especially since we're talking about games. Also, where is it? L. Like is one that we use a lot too. I like to play games. So that's something that they know they know like, they know the word to, they know the word play, and games is one that they just sounded out in the labeling, so they can copy their labeling and just add an S. They should hear that, games. That's a letter that they know pretty well. And that's one sentence right there. So I try to give kiddos a little bit of time to just think on their own before I start adding a sentence starter to it. They might come up with a really great sentence that's 20 words long, and you go, okay, can we fit that on our hand? We can't fit that on our hand. So let's think of a way we can make that sentence shorter. So I'm gonna start with that sentence I just gave you. I like to play games. And we're gonna say that on our hand a few times. I like to play games. I like to play games. I like to play games. We keep saying it so that they're associating each finger with a word. So I'm gonna start out, okay, I is that first word. Do I know how to spell that word? Of course I know how to spell that word. It's a rainbow word. So I'm gonna start with I, and now we go back to our hand. I like to play games. All right, I already wrote I like's my next word. I'm gonna look at that word on my personal word wall because I'm not quite sure how to spell it maybe. And I'm gonna put 2 finger spaces. So this means I put 2 fingers next to my first word, and my next word is gonna start right there. So this makes sure that they keep separation between their words. So I found my word like, L, and now I can move my finger away because I've made my 2 finger spaces. I like, I'm gonna copy that from my word wall, and that is totally okay. This is them practicing how to spell it correctly. I like to, I know that one. I'm gonna do my 2 finger spaces. So 2 fingers, T and O. I like to, I'm gonna put that back on my hand. I like to play games. That's my sentence. I like to play games. Okay, I'm gonna read my sentence back. I like to play games. I like to play. Play is my next word, so that is also on my word wall. We just learned this one pretty recently, so they're probably gonna wanna go back to their word wall and copy that. Again, I do my 2 finger spaces, and I'm looking at my word wall. I know that it starts with a P, and I'm copying this from my word wall, and that's totally okay. Play. Okay, I'm gonna go back and I'm gonna read my sentence again. I like to play games. I'm gonna put it on my hand. I like to play games. And games is a word that I have up here, and I've run out of room, so I'm gonna bump back down, and I don't need to do my finger spaces now, which is great. And I'm gonna copy my word up here, because I know this is the word game. spelled phonetically, of course. G-A-M, and I'm gonna go back and read it. I like to play game. Oh, I forgot my S sound. So g-aim, S. What letter makes that sound? And they know that one. It's like a tire going flat. S. And now it's the end of the sentence. So I need to tell my reader it's the end of the sentence by putting a period there. So that's how you would work through writing a sentence. The next one, maybe the next sentence they wrote is, I played Candyland. And what's great about a word like Candyland is if that's the game they played, they can go to the game board and they can copy it there instead of sounding it out, which is super helpful sometimes when kids get frustrated. So I played, now they know part of that word, play, so they could go played, and they can hear that sound at the end. If I was gonna have them write the word played, it would be spelled phonetically, which means that E is not in there. So it would look like this. They know the word play. And I'm gonna add, they're gonna probably put the D there because they hear played, played. They're not gonna hear an E in there because it's silent. And it's okay for them to spell it that way. Again, phonetic spelling is really important for writing in kindergarten. So that's some information on kind of how we go about writing. Again, putting the sentence on our hand over and over again, going back and reading our sentence in the middle to make sure we've got the words that we need and that we're doing our 2-finger spaces, that we're writing words correctly, especially our rainbow words. And in this sentence, they have 4 rainbow words, which is super helpful. So I really tried to help direct kids to their word wall to help them write sentences because they're doing less sounding out, which they've already done a lot of with their labeling, which kind of limits their frustration a little bit. Again, start with giving your kids less and then add on as you see fit. When we do testing in the classroom, we can't give any direction to our kids because it has to be all from them. So it's really important at home that they're not getting too much help from you guys. And trust me, I know how hard that is because you want to help them so bad, and it's really hard as a teacher also. And you see the frustration that they go through, but the frustration is really good for them. It helps them kind of build that confidence that they can do it on their own. When they're always relying on you, then what they learn is that they need your help to do it. So as frustrating as it might be, try to have some patience with them and let them work through it before you add on any help, because that's really where they're going to learn the most. I'm always here for you guys. I will share as much as I can to help with this process. So shoot me a message if any of this doesn't make sense, if you have questions, if you're trying it at home and your kiddo's just not getting it. There might be some ways I can adapt it for specific kiddos, but this is all stuff they've done in our classroom, so they're very familiar with it. So hopefully it helps them just be a little more familiar with the writing process. Again, if you need help, just let me know. I hope this was helpful for you. Bye.